Masechet Yevamot, Daf Kof Yod Dalid. We mentioned yesterday in passing the law that if a child, a minor, is eating non-kosher, then the adults, the court, we do not have to stop them. Well, we can't feed them, but we don't have to stop a child from eating because a child is patur from mitzvot, and the same would apply also to a deaf person who is also not responsible, competent enough to be responsible for their actions, and would be patur from punishments at least. Questions are is it a minor is obligated but not punishable, or not even obligated at all? Okay. Either way, we're going to have now since we mentioned that, we're going to have a long sugya from here all the way till the end of the perek, all about this very topic. So we begin with the following case. Rav Yitzchak bar Bisna ir kesule mafteche de be midrasha. Rav Yitzchak lost the keys to the bet midrash bereshut harabim b'shabbata, in the public domain on Shabbat. So there's someone in the public domain, but here's the problem: even if he finds them, he won't be able to carry them. So what should he do? So he comes to Rav Pedat, asks him for advice. Rav Pedat says, Amar le zil debar tale v'talya v'letaylu hatam. Here's what you should do. Get some boys and girls under bat mitzvah to go walk around and around that area. Tell them to go play in that area. And that way, while they're walking around over there, maybe they'll find the keys, and then they will say, these are the rabbi's keys, and they'll bring them to the rabbi on their own. So you see, just like in this case, we allow them to violate Shabbat and carry in the Reshut Harabim. You see, we don't ask them to directly. We don't tell them, listen, go look for keys and bring them here. We just say, play around here, and then they'll bring it on their own. We certainly don't stop them. Actually, we really want them to bring them. So just like that's permitted, so he must agree with the a statement that we said before, that a child who is eating non-kosher, Betin is not commanded to stop him. We can't feed him non-kosher, but if he's doing it on his own, that's okay. So lema mesayea le lo yomar adam letinok habe li mafteach habe li chotam ela manicho tolesh manicho zorek. So now, okay, we established that according to the Pedat, you don't have to stop a child from sinning. And what we're going to do now is bring several proofs and offer several challenges to the statement of Pedat. And here's the structure of the sugya until the end of the perek. We're actually going to bring 11 supports and challenges. First, a support about another case of keys, a challenge regarding fire, 3 supports from a grandfather kohen case, a nursing case, and the rest will be all challenges. The last 3 will be Yibum cases from our Mishnah. So that's the relevance that it will have to us. So that's the nice structure. And so here we go. So the following case seems to support Rabbi Pedat, who's lenient, where a person should not tell a child, Haveli mafteach, go and bring me a key in public domain on Shabbat. You can't tell him directly to do that. Or Haveli hotam, bring my seal to stamp something. You can't tell him to do that. Ela manicho tolesh manicho zorek. But if the child on his own is sitting there detaching plants, he's pulling grass from the ground, or he's throwing things in public domain on his own, he's playing ball in public domain, then you can leave him and you don't have to stop him. So here you go. That's the distinction. And this seems to support the Rabbi Pedat, that you can let him do it on his own and you don't have to stop him. Amar Abaye, tolesh ba'asi sheno naqub zorek becharmelit rabbanan. Abaye disagrees. He's more stringent. Not totally stringent, but he says, no, these cases of this source here are only talking about Dirabanan prohibitions, where he's detaching plants from a flower pot, something that grows in a flower pot. If he detach something from it, that's only in a summa Dirabanan, because it's not actually connected to the ground, assuming the flower pot does not have a hole on the bottom. So it's not at all connected to the ground. And regarding the throwing, he was throwing in a karmelit, a dirabanan area, it was in a courtyard where it's there's no isur doraita. So only if he's violating a dirabanan, then you don't have to stop him. You could leave him. But according to Abaye, if the child is violating a deoraita prohibition, then you must stop him. So that's Abaye. But the point is that there's not necessarily a proof from here because it's not necessarily talking about Doraita case, could be the Rabbanan case. All right, so let's see the next one. Tashema goy sheba lechabot en omrim lo kabe ve'al techabe mipnei she'en shibitato alehem. If there's a fire, house on fire, and on Shabbat, so the owners of the house, the Jews cannot put out the fire unless there's danger, of course. But assuming there's no danger, they can't do it themselves. But if a non-Jew comes and he's going to he's going to put out the fire, we don't tell him, please put out the fire, because you can't ask a non-Jew to do a melacha on Shabbat. Incidentally, putting out a fire is not clear if that's actually a melacha deoraita. It's only something's only a melacha deoraita if it's for a constructive purpose. So extinguishing a fire in order, for example, to create a good wick that will light better, that would be extinguishing deoraita. If you're putting it out just because you don't want the fire, but not producing anything positive, actually would it be deoraita? So anyway, that's not clear here. But let's assume that in some way it's deoraita. And so he says, so you can't tell the non-Jew to extinguish it. You also can't tell him don't extinguish it. You don't have to tell him not to extinguish it. You don't have to stop him either. Because en shivitato alehem, his rest is not incumbent upon a Jew. A Jew does not have to make sure that a non-Jew rests. Right? I don't have to go to my non-Jewish neighbor's house and say, hey, stop cooking eggs for yourself. The non-Jew can do it. And if he wants to, it feels like putting out the fire. So good luck to him. You can let him do it. You can't ask him to do it. However, katana balechabot omrim lo al techabe sheshivitato alehem. However, if a child comes and says, tries to put out the fire, we tell him don't do it because the child's resting on Shabbat is incumbent upon the adults to make sure that he does not violate Shabbat. Right? The person has to rest, him and his household, it says his children, his animals. So someone has to make sure that everyone in the household rests. The point is here that this is a challenge to be Pedat, because according to this, we do force a child to not violate Shabbat. So this is how come. Amar Rabbi Yochanan be'oseh al dat aviv. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, this is a case where even if the father didn't say outright, "Hey son, go put out the fire," it's implied, and the father, son sees the father saying, "Oh no, my furniture, my books, everything's burning." Right? Oh, if it wasn't Shabbat, we could put it out. So the son gets the idea that the father wants it to be put out. So the son, under bar mitzvah, goes ahead and starts putting it out. So even though the father's not saying it, he's doing it for the father. That's the problem. This is different than a child who's just throwing a ball in the street. He's doing it for his own fun. So that's why you have to tell him to stop. Because he's doing it for the father. But if he was doing it on his own, then indeed you wouldn't have to. Okay, question about that. Well, then it should be prohibited to even allow the non-Jew, because non-Jew also, you can't ask a non-Jew to do something for your own Shabbat. And even if you don't ask, people make a mistake with this. Even if you don't ask them directly, if they see that you're there and you would want this, and they are doing it for you. For example, if you have a non-Jew who makes coffee for you every day, and so Shabbat says, "Oh, you're here. Come, I'll make coffee for you." Even if you don't say anything, it still is prohibited because he's doing it for you. And so, if you say that this Jewish homeowner is all upset about his house burning down, then non-Jew comes and says, "Oh, I guess you want me to put it out. I'll do it for you," even if no one says anything, then that obvious, and then you'd have to tell the non-Jews, "No, don't do it for me. Please stop." So the answer is no. Goy adata de nafshe abid. A non-Jew is doing it on his own. He's an adult, so he decided, I want to put out the fire. Whatever, he wants to be altruistic. Maybe he thinks he'll get paid later on after Shabbat. He'll get a reward for it, or he doesn't want the whole neighborhood to burn down. Whatever, he's doing it on his own because he's an adult, so he can make that decision. Where a child would be doing it directly for his father. So that's why you don't have to stop a non-Jew, but you do have to stop a child. But that case is different. He's doing it for the father. All right, that's the challenge from fire. Now we're going to see a couple of cases about grandfathers who sometimes spoil their grandchildren in a way that the parent doesn't want. Tashema ben haver sheragil lelech etzel avi imo am haaretz. So you have a child, so he was under bar mitzvah, a child of a chaver, someone who's very strict regarding tirumot and maasrot. So the child goes, and he often goes to his mother's father. I guess it's doing mother's father, because if it's father's father, then the father's father probably is also a chaver, is going to be careful. But his mother's father is a am haaretz. Okay, so while at home, the child is going to be extra careful with everything. But he goes and visits his grandpa, who was an am haaretz. You don't have to worry that when the child goes to the grandfather's house, the grandfather is going to feed him food that he didn't take tumah and maaser from. Masa bi'ado perot en zakuk lo. And furthermore, if he comes home with some fruit, he says, "Hey, look, Grandpa gave me these olives here, these grapes. En zakuk lo. You don't have to take it away from him and take tumot and maasrot again. You could let the child eat it." So you see that in this case, we allow the child to eat to sin. And eat this non-kosher food, potentially non-kosher. And so, right, this would support Rabbi Pedat, right? Rabbi Yochanan says not necessarily, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, b'demai hekelu. No, this is not actually unkosher food. It's demai, ameh haaretz. Usually they do take tirumot and maasrot, but they're not so reliable, and sometimes they don't. So that's why a chaver will always be careful and take tumah maaser anyway. But it's not like it's actually not kosher. It's probably kosher. So therefore, it's called demai. Regarding demai, the rabbis are lenient. So this is an exception. And a usual case, if a kid is eating actual non-kosher, we got to stop the kid. Here, it's presumably kosher, so that's sufficient, and that's why. So this is not necessarily a proof for Rabbi Pedat. Now, according to this answer, the only reason why we are lenient is because it is in fact demai. But what if it was for sure something not kosher? For sure you didn't take maasrot. Then you'd have to stop the kid. No, don't eat that. Take maaser and only then eat it. Okay, so that means, according to the Rabbi Yochanan, we are actually stringent in a case that's for sure to stop the child. Hold on. In the previous case of the fire, Rabbi Yochanan was himself the one who gave an answer and said, no, that's not necessarily a good proof, because the child there, you only have to stop him because he's putting out the fire for his father. But if he was doing it on his own, you would not have to stop him. So you see that Rabbi Yochanan in the previous case was lenient. In this case, he's arguing for stringency, because this is exception only because demai. Otherwise, you have to be stringent. So Rabbi Yochanan is contradicting himself. What's the answer? Truth is, Rabbi Yochanan is in doubt himself. He's not sure whether you need to stop a child or not. And therefore, anything you tell him, he's going to refute your proof either way, because he wants to. He doesn't have a certain proof or a certain viewpoint. So in the first case, he refuted it, and here he also refutes it, even though he's refuting it in opposite directions. He wants to show that it's still up in doubt, and there's no absolute verdict on it. Okay, next case. Tashema. We're talking about grandfather who's a kohen. Ben haver kohen sheragil elech etzel abi imo kohen am haaretz en chosheshin shema yachilenu teruma temea. So again, you have a ben haver, but he's also a kohen. This one. And he also often goes to his mother's father, who's also a kohen. So a kohen family married into a kohen family, but the grandfather is the Am Haaretz. So we don't worry that when the kid goes to the grandfather's house, the grandfather's going to feed him tumah that's teme'ah. Tumah that's teme'ah, you're not allowed to eat. You can burn it, but you can't eat it. And don't worry, masabi ado perot and zakuk lo. And if he gives him some fruit and he brings it home, you don't have to worry that this fruit is tumah teme'ah. So you see that we do not have to stop a child, because it's likely that since the Kohen Gadol, the great grandfather Kohen, is an Am Haaretz, that he's not going to be careful with Tumah and Tahara. So he may be very well Tameh, and he's going to be eating Terumah and giving it to the kid. Shouldn't we stop the kid? This is a proof for the Pedat that we are lenient and we don't stop the child. Isn't that a good proof? We say not necessarily. B'trumah d'Rabbanan. Maybe we're talking about here only that something that's only requires terumah midrabanan. So that's why, since it's only drabanan, and maybe it's not for sure tameh, so and there's a case of doubt, therefore we're lenient. But if it was doraita, then we may very well have to be stringent. So that would be like Abaye. Okay, so no proof from there. Tashema yonek tinok veholech migoya mibehema temea ve'en chosheshin beyonek sheres. A child can go ahead and nurse from a non-Jewish woman, and or from a non-kosher animal, and we don't have to worry that they're eating non-kosher. It's okay. And also, we cannot feed the child anything that's not kosher, something that died without shechita, or if it had shechita but it was sick and wasn't going to live, or other creepy crawlies, non-kosher species of animals and bugs. So do not feed it to him. But regarding all these creatures, no matter what, any one of them that produce milk, the child is allowed to nurse from them, even on Shabbat. Ubegadol asur. However, an adult is not allowed to nurse from them, to take milk from them directly on Shabbat at least. Okay, Abba Shaul Omer Nohagin Hayinu Sheyonkim Behema Tehora B'Yom Tov. Abba Shaul agrees that an adult cannot suck milk from a non-kosher animal, from any animal on Shabbat. But he says we used to suck milk from kosher animals on Yom Tov. Abba Shaul says, sounds like pretty strange to us today, but okay, we still do drink cow's milk and goat's milk, so we just wouldn't do it directly. But the reason here, as we'll see, is because you're not allowed to pump milk by hand on Shabbat. Also, it's problematic on Yom Tov. So therefore, they're gonna extract the milk in an unusual way with a shinui, and not with their hand, but rather with their mouths. It still is an unusual way. So you see, even then, it was unusual. That's precisely why they did it in an unusual way, to get around the Shabbat and Yom Tov prohibition. All right, so that's the source. Now, what's the point for us? Katanemiha en chosheshin beyonek sheretz. You see that a child who is nursing from a non-kosher animal, we don't stop them. There's no problem with it. So you see that this is a support for the Pedat. So not necessarily. Hata mishum sakana. Maybe there's a danger because the child has to eat, and I guess if we're using an animal, it means that the mother is not around, not producing milk, whatever, and so they didn't have baby formula. This is if you don't have the kid milk, then the kid will die. So that's why it's permitted. Okay, we say now, if this is a case where there's a danger, then even an adult. I mean, if an adult is in danger, anyone who's in danger, of course, they are allowed to violate a law. They can eat non-kosher in order to save a life. So then it wouldn't make a difference if it's an adult or a child. There's no proof that you can allow a child to eat non-kosher. No, gadol ba'e umdena. No, an adult, you require consultation, an evaluation by a doctor to make sure. So that's why the adult can't. But the katan can. Okay, katan nameli ba'umdena. So if an adult requires evaluation, so then the child also will require an evaluation. So, and this means that this case is where they got the evaluation and said, yes, still a danger. So how'd you help? Amar Rav Huna ben Yeshua setam tinok mesukan etzel halav. Rita explains that children are treated differently. A child, even without a special consultation, you assume a child is in danger without milk. You don't have to go and check. Whereas an adult, usually adults don't need milk. If there's a special case, for some reason the adult needs milk, then you need a doctor to permit it. Otherwise you couldn't. But a child, no matter what, if he doesn't have a kosher source of milk, then he can have non-kosher. Okay, but the point is that this is not necessarily a proof, because it could be talking about a case of only when the child is in danger, and that's why it's allowed. But if the child was not in danger, then maybe it wouldn't be allowed to. You'd have to stop the child from eating this non-kosher milk. All right, next. Abba Shaul Omer Nohagin Hayinu Sheyonkin Mebehemat Teora B'Yom Tov. This is now a tangent. Now that you mentioned this interesting case about Abba Shaul, who says we used to suckle milk from non-kosher animals on Yom Tov, so we want to analyze that. If it's a danger because the person needs this milk to live, then even on Shabbat you're allowed to violate Shabbat to save a life. If it's not a case of danger, then it's prohibited on Yom Tov also. It's still a melacha. So what's the case? Okay, it's not a life danger that the person will die, but it's a case where a person is suffering a lot. They're suffering from thirst or lack of nutrients, and they really need this, not that they're going to die. So it's in between case. Who extracting milk, pumping milk, or milking an animal by hand is a melacha of extracting, mefarek, separating, removing food from its source. That's a kind of separating. So that is a melacha. But if you do it in an unusual way, not milking with the hands, but rather with suckling with the mouth, so then it's more lenient. Turns it into a derabanan. Shabbat isur sekila gazur rabanan. Yom Tov isur lav lo gazur berabanan. So when the rabbis make this derabanan, so anything that's done with a shinui is only asur derabanan. So the rabbis made that gezerah. Don't milk an animal even in an unusual way on Shabbat. They made that because Shabbat is more stringent. The violation of Shabbat requires stoning. So there the rabbis made a gezerah on Yom Tov where it's only in Isur Lav. There's no prohibition, there's no punishment by stoning. So the rabbis did not make a gezerah if you milk an animal in an unusual way. And that's why Abba Shaul says we used to do it, but only on Yom Tov. We used to take milk in an unusual way from the animal. Okay, so that concludes that tangent, and now back to our series. We finished the last support, and the rest are all going to be challenges. The next three come in a unit. Non-kosher food, blood, eating blood, and a kohen becoming tameh lamet. Tashema lo tochelum ki sheches hem. Regarding creepy crawlies, non-kosher animals, it says do not eat them because they're disgusting. Lo ta'achilum, the word lo tochelum, which means you shall not eat, it can also be read do not feed. Le'azhira gedolim ala ketanim. So that means that the adults cannot feed a child. My love, damar lehu lo tochelu. What does it mean, lo ta'achilum? I translated feed, but actually the Gemara is interpreting it right now as do not allow them to eat. You have to say, if your child's eating it on his own, you have to say, no, don't eat it. You have to stop them. That's what it means, lo ta'achilum. Don't let the child eat it. So that's a challenge to the Pedat. And we answer, no. Lo de la lisfu le biyadayim. No, it means don't feed it to him. Ta'achilum. Don't give it to him directly and feed it to him. But if he's eating on his own, then it's okay. So we saved it to be Pedat. Next challenge is going to be similar. Tashem kol nevesh mikem lo tochal dam. No one is allowed to eat blood. La'azhira gedolim al haketanim. And the extra words here come to warn an adult regarding minors, that even adults have to stop their children from eating blood. Kol nefesh. My love, damri lehu lo tochelu. So when it's to stop them, doesn't mean that if a child is eating blood, you have to tell the kid, no, don't eat that. And that would be a challenge to the Pedat. Lo de lo lisfu lehu biyadayim. No, it means don't feed them directly by hand. Okay. Next case, Tashema emor ve'amarta. Regarding the kohanim, it says, go tell the kohanim that the nefesh lo yitama be'amav, they are not allowed to become tameh lemet. Lazkir gedolim ala ketanim. Extra words here, right? Speak and say means don't only tell yourselves, but even adults have to make sure that the children, kohanim, do not become tameh lemet. Ma'lav damar lehu lo titmu. Doesn't mean that the adult will tell the child, hey, don't go there, don't go to that cemetery, don't touch that body. Lo de la litmu lehu biyadayim. No, not necessarily. It means that you cannot tell the child, hey, listen, I forgot something in the cemetery. Can you go in there and get it? No, you can't direct a child to become tameh. But if a child goes on his own, you don't have to stop them. So again, there's no disproof to be pedat. Now, usrichi, all these three cases are quite similar. Why do we need all three of them? If you told me regarding non-kosher animals, that there I don't have to stop them. Mishum di sudan bemashehu. There I might have thought I should be stringent, because a creepy crawly, a bug, is prohibited even a very small amount. If it's a whole, even ant, if it's a whole ant, is prohibited. So that's why I need you to tell me there that the child can, that I don't have to stop the kid if he's eating it on his own. But regarding blood, where you have to have a revi'ita blood in order to violate biblically, so I would say there, that's not the case. Maybe there I do have to stop the child, so that's why I need the case of blood. If I only had the case of blood, mishum dika karet, that is a very serious prohibition, is isur karet, and so maybe that's why I have to, maybe there I would, I don't have to stop the child. Aval shirasim malo. But regarding non-kosher creepy crawlies, where it's not isur karet, then I couldn't even feed the child. So that's why it has to tell me where both of these cases are true. And if you only told me regarding these two cases of non-kosher animals and blood, I would say that the law there is stringent in that I can't give it to them directly. I can't feed them a non-kosher or blood, because those are prohibitions that apply to all Jews. Aval tumah emalo, but not becoming tameh lamet is more limited in its scope, only applies to kohanim. So maybe I might have thought that regarding kohanim, I can tell a child to go, kohen child to become tameh. So that's why I need that case of tumah. And if I only had the law telling me that I can't tell a kohen child to become tameh, and I didn't have the two cases about non-kosher, kohanim shane, I would have said, oh, maybe kohanim are different, mishum diriba behen bisvot yeterot, because kohanim have a lot of extra misvot, so that's why I have to be stringent and not tell a kohen child to become tameh. But maybe regarding everyone else, I am allowed to feed them non-kosher and blood. So that's why I need them also. So I need all three cases so I know that even though each one has some stringency that doesn't apply in the other case, all of them, I am not allowed to make them do it, but if they're doing it on their own, that is permitted. Okay, so that's why we need those three cases, and now we get to the last three on the list, which are all the Yibum cases that we already had in the Mishnah. Tashema, Shnei Achim, Echad Pikech, Shnei Achim, Echad Pikech, Echad Cheresh. You have two brothers. One is competent and one is deaf. Nisu in Shetei Achayot Pikechot, married to two sisters who are both competent. Met Cheresh Bal Pikachat. So the deaf man dies, leaving the Yevamot who is competent. So then, this is pretty much a regular, normal case, because all the people that are alive are pikchim. Teseh mishum achot isha. So since it's two brothers married to two sisters, the Yevamot is the Yavam's wife's sister, and therefore the Yibum does not apply, and they can go free. And truth is, the Yevamot was only married to the Yavam midrabanan because he was deaf. So for sure, the deoraita marriage will undo the drabanan zika. Good, that's easy case. Met pikach bal pikachat, ma yaseh cheresh bal pikachat. But if the other one dies, leaving a Yevamah who is competent, and now the Yavam is deaf, what should he do? Mosiet ishto beget. He has a problem because he is only married to his wife midrabanan, but now he has a zikah deoraita to this woman, so he cannot remain married to his wife because she is achot zikukato on a biblical level. His marriage, his drabanan marriage, is not sufficient to make the Yevamah his wife's sister and allow her to go free. So he has to actually give a get to his wife, which he can, because however he entered, he can exit. And the Yevamah, he is prohibited to forever, because what can he do? He can't do halisa, and he can't do Yibum, so they are stuck. All right. Now, amai mosiet ishto beget. Now the question is, why does he have to give his wife a get? Why can't they live together? Tetev gabeh. Katan ochel nebelo too. Let them live together. And even though there is a prohibition, because it is achot zikukata, he has a zikah to the sister, so he really can't be with her. But doesn't matter. He's deaf, and therefore he's not responsible like a minor. He's not responsible for mitzvot. So it's like he's eating non-kosher. So we can't make him, but we can let him stay there. So, but the Mishnah says, no, you have to give him a get. So isn't this a challenge to the Pedat, and says we are not allowed to we cannot let a child eat non-kosher, just like we cannot allow this deaf person to remain in a marriage. So see, we stop him, right? No, we say Mishum Isura Dida. No, the reason why we tell him to give a get is not because of him. For him, he's not responsible for this transgression. But she is, and she is a pikachat. And so he has to give her a divorce so that she will not violate this law. Okay, Tashema, next case, it's going to be similar, just the other way around. Shene achim pikchin nisuin shete achayot. Two men who are competent, married to two brothers, married to two sisters. One of the sisters is competent and one is deaf. Met pikach baal chereshet. Mayase pikach baal pikachat. If the competent man dies, leaving a Yevamah who is deaf, what should the Yavam do, who is competent? Teseh mishum achot isha. He has to, she leaves. This is a case where he is fully married to his wife, and the Yevamah is his wife's sister. So she's edva, that's it, she goes free. Met pikach baal pikachat, mayas pikach baal chereshet. However, if the Yevamah is pikachat, and then the pikach, the Yavam, is married to a chereshet, that means his marriage is only midrabanan. That's a problem. Since his marriage is only midrabanan, we cannot say that the Yevamah is his wife's sister. Rather, instead, his wife is achot zikukato. His zikah is stronger than his own marriage. So he has to leave his wife, mosiet ishto beget, ve'eshet achiv b'chalitza. Since he is competent, he can do chalitza. It doesn't matter that she is deaf. A deaf woman can do chalitza. But anyway, his own wife, he has to leave with a get. Ve'amai mosiet ishto beget. Why does he have to give a get to his wife? Tetev gabe katan ochel nevelot hu. After all, since she is deaf in this case, so let them remain married. So what? So she's violating a prohibition. It's okay. She is like a minor who we can allow to eat non-kosher. So let her continue to live with him, even though it's in sin, because she is okay. Yet the Mishnah says we make them leave. That's a challenge to the Pedat, right? No, mishum isura dideh. He, the husband, is competent, so we have to make him give a get because of his sin. You're right. If it was only hers, we could allow it. Okay, so far so good. But now the last challenge is going to be where both him and her are deaf. So we can't say any of those answers. Amarava tashema. Shene achin. Echad cheresh ve'echad pikach. Two brothers. One is deaf, one's competent. Nisuin shte achayot. Married to two sisters. Also, one is competent and one's deaf. Achat pikachat v'achat chereshet. Met cheresh baal chereshet. The two deaf people are married, and the deaf husband dies, leaving a Yevamah who is deaf. So the Yavam, who is fully married, he's competent, married to a competent person. So therefore, for him, this is he's fully married. This is his wife's sister. So she's edva. She can go free. Met pikach baal pikachat. But if the Yevama is competent. Mayaseh cheresh bal chereshet, and the Yavam is deaf, married to a deaf person. So now he has a problem. His marriage is not permitted. His marriage is not strong enough. It's only midabanan, so it's not strong enough to make the Yevama his wife's sister. Rather, opposite. His zika, which is deoraita, means that he's not allowed to remain with his wife because now she is achot zikukato. So he has to give a get to his wife, which he can do since they were married while deaf. They can be divorced as deaf people. And now he can't do anything to the Yevama. He can't do chalitza, he can't do Yibum. And so they remain that way forever. Now, now here, why does a man have to give his wife a get? He does not have a prohibition because he's deaf, and she does not have a problem because she's deaf. Yet the Mishnah says he has to give her a get. What you see here is that a deaf person, just like a minor, we do not allow them to remain in sin. We actually have to go ahead and stop them. We have to be stringent against the Pedat, who said you could be lenient. Amar Rav Shemaya, the answer is Gezerah mishum hatarat Yevama lashuk. Rav Shemaya says, yeah, indeed, from the letter of the law you'd be right, but the rabbis make a gezerah here because to an onlooker who's not so exacting in the details of the case to realize it's only midrabanan and they're both deaf and that's why we're remaining together. To an onlooker, they would just say, oh look, I guess a dirabanan marriage, like a deaf person to a deaf person, is sufficient of a connection to make the Yevama an erva, and that's why he remains married to his wife and he's not with the Yevama. So that's what people will think, and then they'll apply that to another case and they will allow the Yevama to go and get married because they'll think, oh yeah, because in a case where they're biblically married, then indeed it's his wife's sister and she can go marry anybody else. In this case, that's not true. So if we just let it go because they're not liable, it will lead to another case where people will make a mistake, and that's why in this case we cannot let it happen. So in the end, we refute all of the challenges. We also refute all the supports. So we don't have any absolute answer. Halacha l'maaseh is a bit complicated here because although for most poskim are pretty lenient in saying that a bet din does not have to go and stop a child from making a sin. For sure not a dirabanan, and according to some, not even a doraita. Yes, that's true. So we are pretty lenient, but that does not apply to a father who is obligated in chinuch to educate a child. So there, the father has obligations over and above those that are mentioned here, and does have to support the child and make sure he's not sinning and is educated and knows once he becomes bar mitzvah is already accustomed to mitzvot. Hadran alach cheresh. That is the completion of the 14th perek, and now we can begin the 15th perek. Here we go. The 15th perek follows up on the cases of the 10th perek about when people go away and they don't come back, and we're not sure have they died or not. So in this case, back then it was the husband goes away or the wife goes away, but now both go away on a trip, but only one comes back. האישה שלחה היא ובעלה למידת הים. שלום בינו לבינה ושלום בעולם ובאה ואמרה מת בעלי ותינשא מת בעלי תתייבם. If the couple goes away and only the wife comes back, and assuming that it's a time when there was peace between them, they weren't fighting, this couple, and there's peace in the world, there's no war that we know about, and she comes and says, oh, my husband died. So let's say they have children. So then the court will say, we believe her, and she can go and get remarried. Or if they don't have children, and she says, my husband died, so she can do Yibum. We assume that we believe her because they were not fighting. So why would she lie? So we believe her. I mean, there are tremendous, terrible consequences if she is lying and he does come back. Okay, now, Shalom ben, why do we mention these two cases? Because if one of them is not true, then the outcome will be different. Shalom beno libena milchama ba'olam. If there is a war somewhere in the world and they go away then when she comes back and says, my husband died, we suspect maybe she didn't actually see her husband die. Maybe it was just a time of war and she saw a lot of people dying and she knew her husband was in there somewhere and she assumed that, my husband must be dead. But she may report my husband is dead without actually knowing it for sure. So if the time of war, since she may just be guessing, we do not believe her. Also, kitata beno lebena v'shalom ba'olam, or if we know that they were fighting, they were having some marital troubles before they went away, and she comes as my husband died, it could be that she's lying because she wants to get remarried and leave the husband behind, but in fact the husband is alive. Okay. In either of these cases, we do not believe her. The court does not believe her and does not allow her to get remarried or do Yibum. Rabbi Yehuda is even more stringent than Tanakama, and this says even in a regular case where there is peace, we do not believe her unless she comes and she's crying and her clothing is torn and it's obvious from her mannerisms that she is telling the truth. She has to really put on a show before we are going to believe her. But the rabbi said, no, it shouldn't be dependent on that. I don't know, maybe she's not crying, whatever. And so she will be believed either way, as long as the circumstances are ones of peace. That's the Mishnah. Then we are going to explain the cases. Tana, Shalom beno lebena, Mishum de kabel mitna ketata beno lebena. The reason why in the Resha, up here it says that we're talking about a case where there's peace between the couple is because we want to foreshadow the second case where they are fighting. Tana shalom ba'olam mishum de kaba'ed mitne milchama ba'olam. And we also say that there's peace in the world, even though this is a standard. Usually there's peace because we want to distinguish between the second case where there is not peace in the world. So that's why we already mentioned those two descriptions in the first case. Rava wants to explain how come when there's war somewhere in the world, then we do not believe her. Because then we worry that maybe she is just imagining, just guessing. I mean, it could be based on a good guess. It could be that there's a tremendous number of people that die in a certain area, and so she's assuming, but it's only an assumption, and we can't allow her to get remarried only based on an assumption. She's wondering to herself, all these people died. Is it possible that my husband is the one that got away and was saved? It's very unlikely. So she's saying it, but it's only an assumption. If you say that there was peace between them, and so since they like each other, there's peace between them, she's going to guard and wait until she actually sees him dead. And so we don't have to worry that she's going to make a presumption. No, you still can't rely on that, because it could be that the enemy will come with an arrow and spear and really deadly force, and so she says for sure she's dead, and even if he was wounded, then he's going to die from his wounds. So she will, based on a natural assumption, even though they're in love, she will just based on the optics guess that he is dead. But maybe in fact there was someone who prepared medicine and was able to heal the guy, and so it could be that someone amazingly survives even a terrible war. She just will not assume that. So that's why we cannot believe a woman if it's a time of war and she comes back and says without any further corroboration that, oh, my husband died. We suspect that she's only presuming. Now we're going to go through a series of other cases where can we believe the woman or to say my husband died or not. So Rava at first thought to say that a famine is not like war. Because if there's a famine somewhere else and she comes back and says, my husband died in the famine, we assume that she's not going to based on imagination. She was probably there next to him, saw him, tried to save him, and saw him die. And so famine is not different from you don't have the chaos and cloud of war. You can see who died and who didn't. That's what he thought at first. But then Rava changed his mind and he said, you know, it's the same, and we're not going to believe a wife who says, my husband died during a famine, because she may be just presuming. What changed his mind? The following story. Tahida atat. Lekamed Rava, a woman came to Rava. Amar le Baali met bara'av. And she says, yep, my husband died in a famine, out there in a different place. Amar la Shapir avadet de shezabt nafshich. Oh, I guess you did well by running away yourself. You know, you were able to survive. If you had stayed there, you would have been dead too, right? Sakada tech de bahu purta de nafita. Le hava haye, and he says, well, did you suspect that maybe the little flour that you left with him, maybe he could have survived with that? Or another translation of this is, maybe those last breaths, apparently she left him with either very, very little food, or he was barely breathing. And so I guess you figured that with those last breaths, he couldn't have lived, right? And she says, Amar le morna meyada dechi hai gavna la chaye. And she says, indeed, the master Rava, you know that cases like that, a person can't survive. So Rava was actually goading her and asking her a trick question, right? Rava seemed to be saying, oh, it's a good thing you got out of there, because a person just on his last bit of flour, on his last breath, couldn't live. So yeah, you're right, he must have died. And she says, oh yes, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. And so he kind of caught her in her lie. She did not actually see him die. She just said, oh, he's really, down to his last breath or down to his last bread, and there's no way he could make it. So she assumed he died, but and maybe it's likely that he did, but that's not sufficient proof to allow her to get married. So when Rava saw that even in time of famine, maybe it's difficult for her to watch her husband actually totally die. So she went away and assumed, but we cannot believe her because people will make presumptions in such cases. Later on, Rava actually changed his mind again and said, you know what? A famine is even worse than war. In other words, a wife is even less believable than I thought before. But first he thought it was believable, then the same, now even worse. In the case of war, if she says, my husband died in the war, we don't believe him, because that means she just saw a lot of people die in the war, but she didn't see him specifically. But if he says he died in his bed during the war, then he is believed, because that means that she must be that he came wounded, she saw him wounded, she saw him die. So that even in the case of war, if she says, I saw him die in his bed, he's believed. But regarding famine, if she says, I saw him in his bed and he died, maybe she just saw him in the bed very, very weak on his last breath and assumed that he died. In other words, in a famine, she's going to wait. He's probably wounded, so he'll die quickly. But in a famine, it'll be slowly, and she may leave him there, assume he's dead when he's not actually. So in a famine, you won't believe her until he says he died and I buried him. Only then can we know that she is not basing herself on a presumption. Mapolit, a case of a house that falls down, or a rock slide up, and the person is buried under the rocks. Harehu kemilchama, Rava said this is the same as a war, and we don't believe him. We don't believe her, because maybe she sees the house on him. She says, oh, I guess he died. But she didn't actually check, and maybe the rescue workers will pick through the rubble, and maybe actually they may find him alive, like happens today. Sometimes people are able to survive. So damra bidameh, because she's imagining, she's presuming. And so too, if there's an outbreak of snakes and scorpions, it's also like war. She sees all these snakes and scorpions and knows that her husband is around there. She says, oh, he must have died. But she may testify even though she didn't actually see, so we do not believe her. And lastly, Deber, if there's a plague in a certain town, and she comes and says, my husband died in a plague, some say we do not believe her because it's similar to war, and she'll just assume even though she didn't see. Other people say, no, it's not like a war, and we will believe her, she must have seen it. Some say it's like a war because she's just going to presume even without seeing. Some say, no, we believe her. It's not like a war. There's a popular saying that is known that people say that there was 7 years of a plague and not a person died before his time. In other words, during a plague, people may die, but only slowly, someone here, some there, over a long period of time. And so you don't presume everyone died. It's not it's not quick like a war, but rather it takes time. And maybe the elderly die, people who are going to die anyway. So it's not as dramatic or short in time, and people will be able to identify, this person died, this person didn't die. They can say each person died according to his time. Then that means they know that specific person actually died. So if she says my husband died in a plague, it means that she actually saw and witnessed his death, and therefore we do believe her in that case. Baruch Adonai L'olam, Amen ve'amen.